Hello, I'm Andrew Campbell, and I've got with me Hal Schroeder, and we want to talk to you about virtual skills, the skills of working in a virtual environment across countries, across borders, across organizational boundaries, and in situations where you're not always in direct contact or in the next door office to people. So the first tip here is about meetings and virtual meetings. So this is conference calls or video conferences. And the tips here, these are quite important events in any virtual working. The tips here are first, the collective tip is more formality, more structure, more preparation. So the person organizing the meeting really does need to do careful thinking about the agenda and to get the agenda out well in advance so that those who are preparing have time to prepare the agenda items properly. Virtual working is very difficult if people haven't done proper preparation. And this means if you're bringing a proposal to a virtual meeting, that you need to have explained what the issue is, you need to be able to describe what solutions you think are appropriate, and you need to kind of have a recommendation. Those are often done much less formally in face-to-face meetings because people can kind of work it out before the meeting or during the coffee break and so on. So more formality in agendas and in the preparation of the participants. The meeting itself needs more formal chairing, and frequently the chairman in a virtual meeting will need to promote comment from those. In a normal meeting, you can kind of see from people's body language whether they need to make a comment. You don't get that signaling, so the chairman would need to ask, are we sure we've got no comments on this issue, or it would be really useful to have a comment from Jane on this issue, or could we go around the table, as it were, and have everybody share their thinking on this topic. And the other thing is that virtual meetings take longer. They just are a bit slower. Now, there's often less chit-chat and less, talking to people about what they've been doing at the weekend. But it's important to plan in a bit more time, take the agenda items more slowly, be comfortable with, there are always some technical hitches, be comfortable with the delays caused by technical hitches so that you've got time for those participating to really get to grips with it. Hal, second tip.
Second tip. Thanks, Andrew. The second tip is about regular contact. Clearly, when we're in the same office or on the same floor, then it's very easy to exchange ideas, not only in the formal meetings, but around the coffee machine, in the canteen, just strolling down the corridor, maybe even in the car park, those sorts of things. We don't have that so much when we're working with colleagues in different countries or in different parts of the world. So we have to put the work in to make sure that we get those working relationships in really, really good order. This can obviously build on face-to-face meetings. I would encourage you also to put in the work to be in touch regularly. Have phone calls, have Skype meetings, get to know the other colleagues as people as well as working colleagues so that you've got that relationship established before you're really into a heavy program of work, and so that you can build up that pattern of trust, those trustful working relationships that will allow you in due course to be very productive in the way that you spend your virtual working time together. Andrew.
Excellent. My next tip is a pretty straightforward one. It's diaries. One of the frustrations of working virtually is you don't know where somebody is. In a real environment, you can walk down the hall and you can see if they're in their office. You can speak to their assistant and find out if they're in. In a virtual environment, that just is more difficult. So it is really useful for everybody who needs to be working together on a project team or a collaboration or an ongoing colleague relationship for it to be easy for them to find out where that person is, whether they're on holiday, whether they're sick, whether they're out at a meeting, whether they're in the office, and ideally the day before. But good systems for recording where you are going to be in advance, and if you change your plans for recording where you are at that moment, is really helpful to your virtual colleagues. Hal?
We're now going to talk a little bit about virtual media, and we're going to cover three things under that category. The first of those is about which media you use and which media you decide to use as a group. Now, our encouragement to you here is to make sure that the whole group uses the same media. So by that I mean that we don't have half the group or 3/4 of the group sat in a conference room and there's a couple of people who are on the end of a telephone line somewhere. We've all had those meetings, and we know that basically the meeting takes place in the conference room, and half an hour later, by which time our colleagues on the other end of the line could have gone off and had a 3-course meal for all we care, somehow we remember to check in with them and say, oh, is that all right with you, Joe? And, who knows? But one is for sure, we've actually made Joe a less equal member of our community at that point. So our encouragement to you is make sure that to the extent that's possible and practical, that you are all actually using the same media and that you're not privileging one group over another. Andrew, frequency.
Yo, I like your point about the same media, because I think there are some occasions when you can be using multiple media. So if somebody's listening in for information purposes rather than as a full member of the community. But as Hal says, if you don't have people in the same virtual environment, they aren't equal at that meeting. So my next tip is a very straightforward one about more frequency. In the real environment, you see people around the coffee machine, you bump into people at meal times, in the car park, you walk past them in the passages. You need to try and create some of those same interactions in virtual. So it's just more frequent. So the standard monthly team meeting might need to be a 2-weekly team meeting. If the team meeting would normally be every Monday morning, maybe initially you're going to need to have it twice a week. If you would typically meet somebody once a day in and around the office, you probably need to give them a call once a day to say, how's it going, and I've been doing this, and what have you been up to? So put the time in for those more frequent contacts.
Our final tip is around the use of multiple channels. And this builds on the work of a colleague of ours here at Ashridge, Ghislaine Collin, and her doctoral research and her subsequent research in this area. There's a couple of views that we can take on multiple channels. One is that actually we should be really disciplined, and when we're in a virtual meeting, we are just fully present in that meeting and we stick to whatever medium we're using during that meeting and we don't do anything else. The second is that actually we should use multiple channels. So we may be having the main meeting going on, but there will also be, between members of the group in that meeting, there will be texts flying around, there will be a bit of chat on email, so on and so forth. Gislaine's view, and I agree with this, is that actually that second version is to be applauded and encouraged. Well, we can't stop it in any case, so we may as well enjoy it and embrace it. She points out that people who are, let's say, less than 30 years old, they're brought up as digital natives. They're used to using multiple platforms of technology all the time, and they're used to using those simultaneously. So it's not that they're lacking attention, they've got a short attention span, but it's just that they choose to work very flexibly with multiple media. They're very used to doing that, and we should, as I say, embrace that and realise that a lot of the work will be done in the meeting through other media besides the main one, which is where we're looking at the screen, listening to the phone call, whatever it is. There's also going to be a lot of side work going on through texts, through emails, through little messages flying around. So we should recognise that, embrace it and say, okay, we need to make sure at the end of the meeting we've summarised properly, we've got all the communication into the room, but we need to recognise the fact that actually that pattern of communication is going to be a lot richer than just what is going on in the main medium.
How what you say reminds me of the British Liberal Party trying to negotiate a coalition, which is a very unusual thing in Britain, between themselves and the Labour Party. And apparently there was a meeting going on where the head of the Liberal Party was negotiating with the head of the Labour Party about how to do this. And one of the members of the Labour Party was texting the head of the Liberal Party during the meeting to say, don't bother, you're wasting your time. We've already agreed we're not going to form a coalition with you. So this multiple media point is a real one, and it's happening, even amongst older people too. I had one other quick point I wanted to make, which it suddenly occurred to me as Hal was talking, which is about face-to-face meetings, because clearly you will have, even in virtual working, the occasional face-to-face meeting, and what you need to do is to brief your team after the face-to-face meeting as one traditionally would. However, typically, at that moment where you might be briefing your team, you're having to rush off to the airport. You're then flying back. You're then arriving at work the next morning. There's stuff on your desk, and you can easily forget, or you're going to a meeting off-site. You can easily forget to do that team briefing after the face-to-face meeting. So be extra disciplined about that. Even have a virtual team briefing from the airport rather than miss out, or take the half an hour after the face-to-face meeting to give a virtual briefing to your team. I hope you've enjoyed these thoughts about virtual working skills.